please tell people your credentials, what your background is.
Sure. So, my name is Ryan Graves. I have an engineering degree, mechanical and aerospace engineering. I promptly left doing that to go fly F-18s for the Navy as soon as I graduated college. Did that for about a decade, both operationally in combat as well as in an instructor role, teaching the new students. And we did witness something while we were flying in our jets, but we were doing it we witnessed it in the context of our just everyday flying and our missions.
And what year was it that you witnessed this?
So we started seeing these in 2014 was the earliest that I know. 2013, late 2013, early 2014.
And could you describe what was the very first experience?
Yeah, so for me personally, the experience was simply just flying out to the area like I would any other day. And instead of seeing an empty airspace with just my wing person or another squadron doing something a different block, there were all of a sudden a lot of different radar contacts, which is immediately a problem because, we could be hitting one of those or someone working in our area. And this was happening because we upgraded our radar the best we could tell. We were in a earlier radar called the APG-73, and we had come back from deployment. We entered a maintenance phase, it's called. We kind of do a little bit less flying, upgrade the jets if we need to, do any long-lasting maintenance, and we upgraded to the APG-79, which was a much better radar.
And what is the difference in the capabilities of the upgraded radar system versus the original system?
Mm-hmm. So, kind of practically speaking, it's like going from an analog TV essentially to like an OLED. It's, a digital modern tool compared to more of like an analog classical radar that has more limited range and has less ability to track multiple targets and things of that nature. So just generally speaking, we would expect to see, more objects if there were any out there or smaller objects, but there shouldn't have been any objects out there.
And so how far offshore are you when this is all going down?
Our working areas start about 10 miles off the coast, and then it goes out 100 or 250 miles or so, though we don't usually use those far eastern areas. But we would only see them over the water. So they would really only be in our working areas, maybe slightly in between the working area and land, but never over the land. Sometimes over the bays that are in the area that are quite large. But never just kind of zooming west over land or anything like that.
And is this restricted airspace?
It's not. So that's a tricky question. For us operating in a military operating area, it is not restricted in the sense that you have to be there's only one person allowed in there. You could have these little Cessnas kind of bumbling in there, but they would get called out pretty quick, both from the kind of air traffic control agency that's working out there, as well as the F-18s and the other aircraft that may be working out there. But in a broader sense, when we look at it in relation to our air defense identification zone, which is essentially a band of airspace that surrounds our entire country, if your flight path originates out over the water outside of that ADIZ and you proceed into that ADIZ, into our controlled airspace, then you do have to essentially have permission to enter that airspace. It's not a restricted airspace like a traditional bombing range, but it is protected airspace. It's our coastal air.
So you have this upgraded radar system, and what are you detecting?
So on the radar, really what we can learn from that is essentially the kinematics of the object. So where is it essentially, and what direction is it going, how fast is it going, things of that nature. We can't necessarily make out the shape or things of that nature. So it's a representation. It's like a block on our screen to show that information. And so when we see that on our radar, we can tell, where it's located, perhaps what's located around it if there's other objects we're detecting, how fast it's going, what direction it's pointed in, what direction it's traveling in. So we call that velocity vector. So if we see this essentially little circle, have a tail coming off of it. And that tail kind of represents the nose of the vehicle, at least as its flight path is going. And so with that, we would typically see an aircraft just kind of trudging along with a straight line, taking occasional turns. But these objects had a little bit more of a, I don't want to say random, but more less controlled flight path, that velocity vector would kind of jump around a bit more. They would not proceed in like a perfectly straight line as you would imagine like a flight navigation computer would take you, right? It takes you from A to B in the straightest line possible. These objects seem to kind of be moving in a direction that was not a straight line, but generally proceeding in that direction. And so they would kind of be meandering slightly, but moving in that general direction, both three-dimensionally and horizontally.
So
they'd be
winding around, going up, going down.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not on a flat plane, and they're not going in a straight line.
So I don't want to draw too many firm statements like that because we would see them being flat too. We'd see them perfectly stationary up there, regardless of the wind.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. So what kind of wind are you talking about?
Oh, gosh. I mean, at altitude, you can have anywhere up to 100, 120 knots of airspeed.
What is that in miles per hour?
It's about 100, 130, 140 miles an hour.
So they're completely stationary with a 140 mile an hour wind.
Correct.
How would something do that?
It's confusing to me as well. Even if we had something that could just burn that much energy, right? Like if you had a sphere surrounded by little rockets, right? Just imagining something right now.
Okay.
And if you wanted to keep that perfectly stationary, right, against gravity, you could just fire all the rockets at the bottom really fast and hopefully keep it flat, right?
Right.
It's going to have tiny little variations. And then if you have wind hitting it and all this, you could potentially have those rockets try to counter it, but it would never be perfectly still in winds like that.
Because the wind's not perfectly still either, right?
Exactly.
It changes and varies.
It does. So it's almost like it's the wind. It's not even really fighting the wind, it seems. You know, it just seems like it's just there in a way.
Wow. So the first time you see these things, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the first time really was, well, you know, what is this, right? It's not a UFO or something mysterious at this point. It's at what we're thinking at this point we see on the radar is just, well, our radar is broken, right? These perhaps don't represent physical objects yet because we hadn't, you know, visually seen these or seen them on our camera yet. And so, you know, we kind of like, hey, you know, what's going on here? You know, is anyone else seeing this kind of thing? But not really like investigating it, right? It's just kind of like, all right, there was stuff out there, but maybe next time we'll take a look. But the way our systems work, when we have all these contacts on our radar, and if we kind of just select one out with our little cursor there, all our sensors go to it. Our FLIR goes to it, which is our camera system. All our weapons, they have like their own little eyes in some sense, and they all look in that direction. And so eventually, you know, someone had one of these selected and flew close enough so that as they look at their FLIR system, their camera, they could see something that was at the spot represented on the radar, right? So there was something there.
So they were seeing it visually with their own eyes?
Not at this point, just on the FLIR system.
The FLIR system.
And so it's a regular camera and also an infrared camera. And so typically we'll roll around in infrared just because it returns a better image, typically. So yeah, you know, it didn't look like an object they were seeing on the FLIR. It just looked like a source of IR energy in a sense, almost as if someone was shining a flashlight. But something had to be there to be reflecting that energy or creating it. So at this point, to answer your question, now we're like, okay, this isn't just an error in our radar. This is perhaps, you know, we're thinking this is real. We have to really respect this as like a safety hazard now. Even if it's just a small, you know, however small ribbon of tinfoil, right? Like that suck down the engine can still take out an aircraft, right? So we have to be very respectful of that.
Like a Mylar balloon type thing?
Potentially, right? Yeah.
But how fast are these things going?
So sometimes stationary, right? Sometimes they would be going around 0.6 to 0.8 Mach, which is at altitude about, you know, 240 to maybe 330 knots, you know, around there.
So somewhere in the range of an airplane.
Yeah, a fighter aircraft would be kind of flying around at those airspeeds, except sometimes they would be perfectly stationary as well.
Right. So it's not exhibiting any sort of patterns that you've recognized in the past.
No, they have actually. So, although
with the stationary, no, right?
Correct. With the stationary, no. With the meandering kind of flight path, no. But I would also see them essentially fly what we call a racetrack pattern. And essentially what that means is they fly in a straight path, and then they do like a 180-degree turn in a certain direction. Then they fly a straight path, then turn again. You know, so that's what we call a racetrack pattern as opposed to a circular holding pattern. We did witness racetrack patterns In fact, I think there's been some cases off the West Coast just the past couple of weeks where people have also been observing objects flying in racetrack patterns high at altitude with lights. So I do recognize that behavior, but I don't necessarily think that means we have to attribute it to normal behavior necessarily. That type of flight path is important because it's a very efficient way to fly, right? If you have to maintain the position in a certain area, you want to minimize how much you're turning. Because anytime you're turning in an aircraft, you're using more energy than if you were just flying straight and level. And so by having a racetrack pattern, it's an efficient way of holding in a position by maximizing straight and level time and minimizing your turn time.
And how long would these things stay up there for?
So from our experience, and again, we weren't studying these, but they were always out there. They were
Always.
out there when we took off, we'd see them, and then we go to land, they would still be out there.
Like every day?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day.
So you guys go from not having any idea that these things are out there to an upgraded radar system to seeing them every day.
Yep.
What is the thought? Like, how are you feeling when these, like, is there an evolution of the thought pattern of how you're addressing these things and thinking about them? Initially, you're thinking they're errors. When do you start getting a thought that, like, what the fuck is this thing?
Yeah. So that happened when we visually saw one. And the first time we visually saw one, the object was directly at what we call the entry point of the area. So, that box that I told you about in the sky that starts 10 miles off the coast, there's a particular GPS, location and altitude where incoming traffic will fly in and outbound traffic will fly in the exact same spot, but will fly out 1,000 feet lower. There were 2 aircraft from my squadron, VFA 11, and they flew, took off as a flight of 2. That means they're essentially flying in a formation like this. And as they hit the area, one of these objects went right between the aircraft. The lead air crew saw the object. The Dash 2 aircraft crew did not, which is not surprising because they're usually, you're very focused on flying formation. You're just staring right at that aircraft. The lead really has actual leeway to look around. So he saw it, and he immediately came back. I have to assume he didn't have it on his radar because he wouldn't have flown through this object at the entrance point. He turned around, flew back, landed, and I was in the ready room when he come back, and he had all his gear on, which typically is not a good thing because you want to get that stuff off as fast as possible. So usually means there's a problem of some nature, and he was just sitting there saying, "Hey, I almost hit one of those damn things." And we all knew what he was referring to, even though we didn't necessarily have a name for it, just because we were seeing these so much. And he described it. He described it just as a black or dark gray cube, and that cube was inside of a clear or translucent sphere. And essentially, the apex or the corners of that cube, best he could tell, were touching that inside of that sphere.
And that description mirrors many of the descriptions that people have had of these, whatever you want to call them. Whether they're calling them UAPs now for some strange reason. UFOs is I don't know. Does it have a dirty connotation to it? And is it tainted because of so many crazy people talk about UFOs? Is that what it is?
It does come with a lot of assumptions baked in.
It baked in. So that's something. But whatever it is, that is a design that people have reported seeing before. That this translucent sphere and this cube. Can you see through the cube?
Not to my understanding, no.
So it's some sort of solid black cube that's inside this translucent sphere, and it's just floating around and flying around the sky.
So, that's a good point. Is it floating around? Is it flying around? It's doing both, which is strange, right? Because you could think of that description and go, okay, that's kind of some kind of weird balloon maybe with stuff in it. And that's certainly, one way. If you just view that angle of it, then it seems explainable. But when that, the balloon-like object starts cruising down at, 0.8 Mach, that nullifies that particular idea. And you'll see that a lot where it's not just like that one picture, that one behavior. It's really, you kind of have to zoom out a bit and look at everything in relation to each other and say, okay, why is this weird? Okay, it was hanging out in a racetrack pattern. That's not exotic. But when you learn it was doing it for, perhaps 13 hours.
13 hours?
Perhaps they were out there all the time, So, I land and I go back. And we weren't on a intel mission to analyze these, right? We're going to do our training. It's very expensive, $30K an hour to fly these things, right? So really the only time we can put energy into looking at these things is when we're kind of transiting back and forth or waiting for a fight to start. And so, it's...
You can't touch it.
Right.
What is gravity about that? Like the concept of gravity to most people is gravity is bringing something towards it.
Right. Well, I guess you would say it's anti-gravity. Mm-hmm. It's gravity shifted 180 degrees. It's, anti-gravity.
And did they have any understanding about what could possibly create this effect? Do you have any areas where they'd like you to look into?
No, they knew there was a fuel source in it, and they were proficient at making it work. And again, my analogy to something like this, you can drop a motorcycle off in the wagon train days and just leave it with the keys parked outside, somebody's place. Everybody will come around it and they'll poke and prod, and eventually they'll turn the key, get it to start, and become proficient at riding it.
Yeah.
But they won't be able to understand what the hell's going on. They won't be able to make the plastic fender, much less anything else. And I think that's exactly the state we were at. We played around with the parts long enough before I got there where they could make the reactor operate, take the fuel out, and know that it makes it work. How exactly what was going on in the reactor remained a mystery at the time. I think we made some progress on what was going on inside, but I don't think anybody really knew anything. They could just watch what was going on and make note of it.
How long?
I'd say about 6 months or so.
What progress was made while you were there?
Well, we came up with a bunch of reasonably good ideas about how the reactor worked. And one of them was the square base of it was essentially like a cyclotron, which is a small particle accelerator, a circular one. Particle accelerators, linear particle accelerators, are just a, long tube essentially accelerate particles with high voltage and, radio frequencies till they reach high speeds. But a cyclotron does that in a small circular area. And there's this very element fuel, element 115, something that wasn't on our periodic charts at the time.
But it is now.
It is now, yeah.
When come on the periodic table now, the way the charts now?
I don't remember. Do you remember when they...
2004, Darmstadt, Germany, I think, is where they first fabricated 4 atoms. It lasted 220 milliseconds with the atoms. It's nothing, right? And then it later was discovered a couple more times they could fabricate it. Then they gave it a place then on the periodic chart after that, called it Moscovium.
So they told you about this stuff in 1982?
Yeah, well, we
not
kind
92.
What year?
88 and 89.
When
I
you
was
were,
there. 82 is when
82 was when you were
at
at Los Alamos. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So 89, they told you about this stuff. So this was not like...
No, they didn't tell about it. That's one of the things that this group came up with. The God, I keep losing my train of thought with this thing.
So this one area, this element 115 was the fuel.
Yeah, it was the fuel.
The world will forgive you for having migraine. Can I just
It's really
say
hard to
one
do
thing?
this.
Can I
Just give me a minute.
We'll just give you more
I just
booze.
want to say one. Yeah, definitely. I was going to say one thing. But for the last 30 years, people have just been on the attack on Bob. Getting to know him, the personal effects on his life. It's really hard to understand unless you meet his family and his wife. I mean, this is the last thing he wanted to fucking do, was have to talk.
Yeah, we should have done that, Jeremy. That you and I had this conversation. I watched your documentary. We had this conversation, and I said, I have to talk to him.
Yeah.
The document, there's been detractors. There's been a bunch of people that called bullshit on many of the things that you've said, but over time, many of the things that you talked about, even in the 80s, have proven to be true. Things that people said were not true were proven to be true. Element 115 was one of them.
Right. Element 115, the fuel they had, was stable. In other words, it didn't decay. It wasn't emitting radioactivity. When they synthesized 2 or 3 atoms of the 115, it did decay, and it was not a stable element. So they're kind of two different things. But this is kind of typical. Elements always have, or pretty much always have, stable isotopes and unstable isotopes. Like I think cesium has like 30 unstable isotopes to it. So, hydrogen, for example, you're familiar with hydrogen gas. It's stable. It's not radioactive. But there's also two other types of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium. And deuterium isn't radioactive, another stable isotope of hydrogen, but tritium is radioactive. Now, they're all hydrogen, but they just have different amounts of neutrons. So it's the same thing with other elements and element 115. Depending on the amount of neutrons it has, designates the isotope, but it's 115. They will continue to take or experiment and try and make 115 at different isotopes, and I'm sure eventually they'll come up with a stable version, but it's the stable version that has the properties that we're talking about.
So they somehow or another had acquired a stable version. Did they say that the stable version had come with this craft?
Yeah, absolutely came with the craft, yeah.
At the time, you having a firm knowledge of the periodic chart and knowing what was real and what wasn't real, what was your reaction to having this stable element 115 that wasn't even supposed to exist?
Everything was impossible.
Right.
I mean, down to the metal. I did get a chance to look inside the craft on only one occasion, and this was important because where the reactor sat might have been critical to how it operated, since everything operates without any interconnection, so the placement of components might be critical. So they allowed me to go inside and look at it. Again, I forgot where the hell I am.
So going into this craft, and what are you thinking when you're inside of it? Like, what are you seeing?
It's a very ominous feeling because there are no, first of all, everything is one color. It's like a dark pewter color, and there are no right angles anywhere. It's as if somebody took, I've said this before, somebody took a model fashioned it out of wax and then heated it just for a short time so everything melted. Everything looks like it's fused together. Everything has a radius of curvature where two items meet. It's a really weird looking thing. But there was almost nothing other than a small foldable hatchway that looked recognizable. Everything was really unworldly, to pick on it. A way to just
you get inside this thing, and it's designed for something that's much smaller than a human being.
Yeah, can't really stand up to the very center of it.
And how do you?
I'm 5'10".
And what do you think this was designed for?
Say something close to half my.
Wow. So little 3-foot tallish creatures.
The seats were small too. I mean, obviously it was made, for something small. But there's nothing else in there. There's just seats, the reactor, and some of the subcomponents. There's no control panels. There's no bathroom. There's no decorative components or artwork or anything that you would recognize or trim. I mean, it's just a very bare bones thing.
You're not seeing screens.
Well, there are archways around it that are part of the superstructure, and one of the archways can become transparent. When I was in there was another group working on one of the archways, and you could call that a screen, more or less.
Through that archway, it would maintain the solidity, the solid, whatever metal it was.
Yeah,
but you could see through it.
Yeah, it just became. Yeah. I saw that happen once or twice before I left.
Did you have any questions about what the fuck?
No, there's no.
Become transparent, and you realize it's still there, but you could now see through it.
Yeah, now that's not that impressive. We do have some liquid crystal materials that are like that. They have
seen that in bathrooms.
Smart glass. Yeah, they call it smart glass. So this is just, and I don't know if the craft is made of, an advanced metal or a ceramic. It was cold to the touch, so I would lean more towards a metal.
You're allowed to ask questions.
No, they work on the buddy system, so I can only exchange ideas and talk to Barry. Now this really interferes with science because science is based on free discussion. And ideally, you get a bunch of guys together, exchange ideas, work on problems, and that's how things move forward. But they're so over-the-top concerned about security, they split everything off, and everybody becomes stagnant. It just destroys any of the progress you can make, or at least makes it go so slow. I think they wound up shooting themselves in the foot.
Which is probably why they arrived at this bottleneck that they needed to get this madman with a jet-powered Honda to come in and see what he could do.
That was an act of desperation. I think they wanted someone that thinks out of the box and let's just give this guy a try here, because
Right.
they weren't, and they might have done this 4 more times since up to the point in time today. Assume still working on this thing.
And when you see this craft and you're inside, was there any indication that there was an area that they would use to control it, to pilot it? Was there a pilot seat? Was there...
There were 3 seats. They sat around, the reactor was in the dead center of it, and then equidistant around there were 3 seats.
So there
And
was,
that's all. There was a large, they're not consoles, they're large rectangular objects, also spaced, equidistant around the center. There's nothing on them. There's no buttons. There's no lights. There's
and
no
they look
controls.
same color, the same
Everything
thing.
same
It's just
color.
a different shape.
Right. And directly underneath them, there's 3 levels in the craft. The main level is what we're talking about. Directly under that, those are the gravity amplifiers, the big rectangular objects. Underneath them are the gravity emitters that look like, for lack of a word, a trash can hanging on a pipe. 3 of those. And then the top layer, this is just my personal belief, I think that has to do with a navigation or their version of a computer with some planar panels, sensor panels around the craft that we would call portholes, but they're not portholes. They're just black areas. And I think that just determines its position in space. But I physically was in the center section, and I stuck my torso in the bottom section and hung upside down so I could see how the gravity amplifiers were positioned.
What is roughly the size of this thing?
I don't remember from being that after all this stuff was over, I had John Andrews, a guy from the Testers Model Corporation, and we sat down and tried to figure out from what I saw and known sizes of things, and we came up with 52 feet in diameter. And
So
I
it's
think
fairly,
that's
fairly small.
Yeah, so I think that's a reasonable guess.
Now you see 9 of them, and you got a brief glimpse at the other ones. How were they different?
Oh, they looked completely different. One looked like I called a Jell-O mold, and it looked like a classic Jell-O mold with the rippled sides to it. One was a very flat disc, like like a straw hat or something like that. That was sitting up on its edge, and the thin part of it looked like a projectile had been fired through the edge of it. So I don't know if they were attempting to see if the metal could be penetrated, or if that's where the thing came from. Maybe it was shot down. But that was the only one where I saw there was, actual physical damage to it.
And that one was roughly the same size? They're all...
They were kind of too far away to tell.
There was several teams that were working on the propulsion system, so there was different teams that were working on these different aircrafts?
I don't know. I could only assume.
Right. Now, when you're sitting in this thing and you're looking at this otherworldly craft, your goal is to try to figure out how this thing functions. Your goal is to try to figure out how this reactor... but you would imagine they would give you more time than just one day to check that out.
Oh, it wasn't one day.
Right.
Yeah, Barry was there. I think Barry was sleeping there. Now, that isn't weird. Up at the Tonopah test range where they work on stealth fighters, you go, I think, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, and you stay up there too. So it's not weird to stay up at the test site.
Right.
So, yeah, I think he pretty much, and he acted like he's been up there for a long time.
Yeah.
But
he's still there.
Yeah, who knows?
Do you have contact with this guy?
No. Oh, no. I wish I did. I kind of thought he's going to come out after I did.
Right.
And I think I had so much flack and it's so much shit for what went on. I think I wound up helping security there, and everybody became afraid of, doing or saying anything after that.
So what kind of reports did you have to give? So you're not making much progress, right? You're just trying to figure out what this thing is, and it seems impossible.
Well, we didn't personally make them. We were always... There was never a lot of information that we gained. the guy, you would call him our supervisor, his name was Dennis Mariani, and of a military-looking guy, and he would routinely pop in, during the day, and, hey, what's going on, guys? And he would essentially relay any information, anything new we came up with. I mean, he was our go-between, where we presented him the information, then he took it to wherever they were, assembling all the data from everybody.
Now, I assume you're working normal days, like an 8-hour day?
No,
No?
it was really weird that I would be only called in on certain, and they would be weird hours too. Most of the time later in the evening. I mean, I can get a call at 11 o'clock at night, and they'll say, it's now 11 o'clock. By 11:45, you need to be at the McCarran terminal, and we'll let you know when we have.
What did you do while you were there? If you're looking at this object, this reactor, and you can't figure out what it is or how it works, other than the fact that it works on this element that we don't even know about.
Sure. I mean, the thing was what you do with anything. If you're trying to analyze it, all you can do is perform tests. And all we did is try and come up with every kind of test we possibly could. I mean, we tested, it violated a lot of what we thought was impossible to violate. I mean, one of the first laws of thermodynamics, I mean, essentially any machine, any device that operates always makes extra heat. Nothing works at 100% efficient. Even the headphones you're wearing, anything that takes power, some of that power is going to be converted to heat, and it's just wasted. This didn't. I mean, we looked at, back then we had infrared cameras. They're different today, but back then you had to pour liquid nitrogen into the camera to cool the sensor down and get these infrared images you've seen. But it never got, no matter what the load was on the reactor, it never got above the ambient temperature, which is impossible. I mean, you're, pulling out huge amounts of power, and nothing ever gets warm. We tried measuring magnetic fields, and there was nothing there. So we started playing around with the emission from the emitters, the gravity wave itself, and saw what we could do with it and how it was focused. So we really spent all our time just trying to see what the stuff can do and what we can control.
So you're seeing what it could do, but you couldn't ever figure out how it was doing it.
No, not really. I mean, we really could only use come up with a best guess. Now, I'd say that I could absolutely state for certainty how anything actually worked.
Now, so you're working there, and while you're working there, you're under this crazy schedule. Forgive me for explaining your story, but you would get these phone calls. You would have to go to the airport at 11 p.m., and your wife started thinking that you were having an affair.
Yeah, apparently so. Now, I did give my permission to have, as part of the, security clearance process, I gave written permission to have the phones monitored and things of that sort. So they weren't doing any covert stuff. They, with any Q clearance, which is civilian top secret clearance or military top secret clearance, they go talk to friends and, places you've been, make sure you're not connected to foreign countries. But, monitoring your phone is nothing unusual. However, they insisted that, you don't even talk to your loved one, to your partner, to your wife, whatever, about what's going on. So she was essentially in the dark and didn't know the phone was being monitored. Well, part of the security clearance is that not only do you not have any connections to foreign countries and aren't a maniac, but you have to have a stable home life too. Well, she started having an affair with a flight instructor. Now, they were monitoring this on the phone, and they knew it, and I didn't. So they stopped me coming in, and their attitude at the time was, we need to see how this is going to play out, and if Lazar's going to get a little weird or anything. So let's just, hold him off from coming in and, see what happens.
And they explained this to you, what was happening?
Well, after the fact, yeah, because time kind of went on, and there were guys that were following me around, And I started getting a little concerned, going, well, shit, are they booting me out of the project? And if so, they're not just going to let me hang out at home and go get a new job knowing what I know. So as time went on, I started getting a little concerned, and I took my closest friends and just kind of got together and I said, hey, remember that job I told you about? This is what's going on. And like, you don't need to take my word for it. Wednesday night, we need to all go out here. I want to show you what's going on. So I took everybody and we went out to, remember, since I had the test flight schedule, and went outside the base, out into the desert, and so everybody could see, one of the high performance tests. And, it left quite an imprint on everybody, so they knew I wasn't.
And there's videos
crazy.
of these tests, right?
Yeah, but remember, this is it's in the dark in the 80s with a big monster-sized camcorder, and you got, a bright light jumping around. But, yeah, I mean, we did video of it, but there's no, by today's standards, it's.
But is
it's
your
garbage.
video specifically available, the video that you took?
Yeah, well, George Knapp has it.
Is it online?
I give it to him.
Do you know?
I have no idea.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I show clips of it in my film. It's
Right.
it's online, and someone did a deep analysis of it. It was interesting to take a look at how.
Pull this microphone up to your face. Keep it about a fist from your face.
All right. To see how his video looks now, but as far as video evidence, I mean, we are talking 80s camcorders. The most important thing is the human story here. Everybody that he took up there on 3 separate occasions, they don't all like each other. They don't all talk. They all agree on one thing. They saw something that night at the exact point in time and space that Bob Lazar said. And remember, this is 17 miles south of Area 51. No one even knew really about Area 51. We're talking Papoose Lake, and they all agree. They saw something that night they had never seen before, and they've never seen since, right when he said it. So that's one of like the 6 things where I'm like, how did he know? You can dismiss him. I tried to dismiss it. But some things we can't get around, and there's about 5 or 6 of them. How did he know about those?
If Jamie wants to find that video right now, what would he look under?
Bob Lazar, UFO, S4, Area 51, just kind of like that. So it's like the S4 UFO video, Bob Lazar, and a guy does an analysis, but you're analyzing these 80s videos.
Right.
He from the very beginning, Bob never said, I have proof of my story and I'm going to tell the world. He said at the very beginning, I cannot prove my story. That's not why I'm telling this. George Knapp convinced him to tell people, and he lived through it. And I didn't believe it either until I talked with George.
Okay, so you film this test flight, one test flight, and then you get caught.
Actually, it was, I think, the 3rd time, because we went out there the first time. Everybody saw it. Everybody was amazed because it did some radical maneuvers, and everybody had a lot to say about it.
Maneuvers that I've seen the video. It doesn't. I don't think there's something we have now that does that.
No,
in terms of like a human piloted craft. I mean, I don't know, obviously, with the government.
No, it's impossible. Nothing can move like that. And remember, we didn't start filming from the very beginning. We were waiting for something, to happen. The craft took off and then came flying at us, stopped, turned at a right angle, flew back, and then, after it did some, amazing stuff, we like, to get the camera, and then we started filming. So it doesn't have all of it on there; it just has some.
The way I describe it to my friends, and they said, "What does this look like?" I said, "Take a laser pointer, and then have a wall, and then move it around the wall." Like, how it moves around the wall, it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with inertia or physics, or it's not impeded in any way by the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like.
You're essentially separated from reality, as crazy as that sounds, with being encased its own gravitational envelope. Inertia is not going to affect it. And, this is how some of those recent sightings with Commander David Fravor, I'm sure you've heard of the
Yes.
Tic Tac UFO. I mean, he describes exactly, the thing operates exactly the way I was describing. That's why he was interested to talk to me. But we saw this, and, on the way home, it's like, hey, we got away with it. We should try it again the next test flight date. So this became a thing to do. And I think it was on the 3rd time that we got caught. I mean, we started becoming a little careless. I think we took a motorhome out there. And, it was like the stupidest thing you could
Took a
possibly
grill,
imagine.
started tailgating.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And
Again, you're in your 20s.
Yeah. And, what was funny was we went out there, and my friend Gene Huff and I were leaning on the front of a vehicle. And just for some reason, we just started talking shit. Like, well, I hope they realize that I don't remember what we were saying, but, that it's something about attacking the base or something along those lines and stealing the craft or something like that.
Something crazy.
And then about 20 feet in front of us, we see a little green light fall on the ground and roll to us. And unbeknownst to us, now it's pitch black. You can't see your hand in front of your face. There were a bunch of guards standing right out there, and they had a night vision scope where they were like from here to the wall looking at us, listening to us, and the guy dropped it, and the scope rolled over to us, and you could see the green screen. We turned the lights on, and all these guys are there. So it was...
Whoa.
Yeah. So we did incredibly stupid stuff and got caught, as we should have.
So when they catch you and they bring you in, then what happens?
Well, I went in for debriefing. The following day, I went to Indian Springs Air Force Base, which is kind of a defunct base that they used to use at the nuclear test site. And this is when they brought out the transcript of the phone call with my wife. And, they sat me down and we said, when we meant to keep the secret, we meant you can't tell your friends, right? And it just being sarcastic and trying to. Mm-hmm. And then they got real serious. But this is where they, took the transcript out and were reading me what my wife and, our friend were talking about. And I don't know, it was a hard time.
So what happens from there? What do they do with you? Why don't they arrest you?
I don't know. I don't know why. I'm not sure they knew what to do, but they did let me go that night, and I went home. And this is kind of when the most stressful part started.
Because you're realizing that you're being monitored 24/7.
Now I know not only am I being monitored, but now I know I'm in trouble. And it wasn't a short time after that I contacted, at that time, the only investigative reporter I had heard of in Las Vegas was George Knapp. And, told him some of the story because I had no idea what the hell was going to happen at that point.
So George Knapp tries to dissect your story, tries to find holes in it, tells it, puts it online, and makes everybody aware of it, and that's how I found out about it.
Yeah, to make a long story short. Yeah.
What happens, to really make a long story short, what happens from there on? I mean, do they contact you and say, hey, Bob, it's probably a good idea if you shut up?
Oh,
Did they try to label you as crazy? Was there...
There were a lot of things that happened at, between that point. I'm leaving out a lot of stuff to fill in the story. We'd have to go back to Los Alamos and well, I really don't want to talk about that. The
top secret weapons stuff that you were working on.
No, I'm talking about the 115.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. I have to think about how I'd...
What is the problem with this?
I don't want to get myself into more trouble by admitting something. So I just have to dance around a couple.
He was rated just during the filming of the movie. People thought it was
the movie's great, by the way.
Thanks, Joe.
And it's on Netflix right now if anybody wants to check it out.